So there is a lot of news, but and we will get to all of it, and I'm a finance nerd, so I care more than I probably should. But let's start a little bit with you. Say the ChatGPT version of your life would be born in Iran, your parents leave with you when you're kind of a toddler, go to Sweden as refugees, you're educated there, you end up coming to the US as an adult to be an academic. Wait, that's a lot. And when you think about your childhood and growing up, are there lessons you feel you learned or skills you feel you learned that you've brought to leadership at Databricks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest challenge that most of us as human beings face is that we have all these self-defense mechanisms that make it very hard for us to see the truth. I had the privilege of being moved around between lots of different environments, lots of different schools, lots of different countries, different religions, different socioeconomic statuses, and what it kind of taught me, painfully, is that you can kind of simulate and put yourself in someone else's shoes, and that's extremely important as a CEO, because when you have your customers, you have your employees, you have product people, you have sales people, you have HR people, you have marketing people, finance people. How do they think? How are they going to react? How do you get them motivated to all work towards the same goal? The most important thing is, can you simulate backwards? How are they thinking? How are they going to perceive the messages you're telling them? Yeah. And that I think I learned. That's why whenever people ask me, like, oh, I don't want to move to that city because my kids are this age. I don't want them to leave school. I say, no, do it to them. Uproot them, move them between different schools, make it hell for them. It's awesome.
You've said that you feel that company cultures are reflections of the CEO's culture, a company's values are reflections of the CEO's values. What is the culture of Databricks as a reflection of you?
Yeah, I think I think you are kind of what you grow up doing. Like that first job, you spend a bunch of the years doing. That's who you kind of are. So I grew up as a researcher. I did my PhD, and then I did research. So I think it's the mindset of a researcher, essentially. So one of our culture principles is truth-seeking. That's what you're trying to do in research. It's not easy to get to the truth. It's elusive. And facts change and so on. But really, as a researcher, you're always trying to not be so emotional and so opinionated about what your opinions or where you are. You just want to find out how does this work? What is the truth behind this thing? So that's an essential culture principle at Databricks. It's not common in the industry. In many big companies, people get really good at how to manage up, how to say the right stuff.
And you don't think that, it's one thing when you're a relatively small company, a couple dozen people, even maybe 100 people. You're thousands of people now, right? How do you know if that's continued to trickle down all the way?
Yeah, so the way you establish culture is, 3 ways. Number 1, you interview for it. So make sure that you're evaluating every person that comes in based on the culture principles. So truth-seeking is one of the things. It's not actually that hard. Tell me when you screwed up last time. Tell me something that you really botched up, and if you can
not
tell.
Not reporting on your fundraising yesterday. That's when I did it.
Exactly. Well, there you go. See, so that's your truth-seeking guy. So you're hired. But that's kind of like, you can kind of sense, whereas people are like, oh, maybe I worked too hard or something, or they just open up and tell you like, oh my God. So do that in the interview process. If you do that right, you're kind of halfway there. If you want to have plus points, also make sure you promote the people that have that culture. So in the promotion process, you make sure that you really evaluate, are they really satisfying those culture principles? And that one is hard because you might have stellar employees that have had huge impact, but they're actually they're not really the culture of the company. They succeeded because of other reasons. And then the third one is, performance management. You shouldn't have people in your company that don't satisfy. And maybe you made a mistake, maybe you hired the wrong person, maybe you promoted the wrong person, but now that person is not the culture. Can you move them out?
How do one of the things that's interesting about Databricks compared to a lot of other VC-backed startups, and part of this is the valuation, the money you've raised. You guys have done a bunch of large acquisitions, a couple acquisitions over $1 billion. When you're buying another company, granted smaller teams, you're not. How does that apply on the culture side? Because you might think you've got that with the founder, but there's a bunch of other employees who didn't necessarily interview the same way that Databricks would have interviewed to bring those people in.
Well, the culture, whoever the CEO's personality is, the culture of the company. So if you get the right CEO, you're good. So
that's easy. Well, is that? How big is that for you as opposed to possibly getting the technology or?
Yeah. Look, most companies, what they do, they have these corporate development teams. They look at, EBITDA, revenue growth, finances, and then they evaluate and they do a lot of finance, Excel math, and then they convince themselves it's a good idea. We kind of don't. We do that last. We start up front with the people. are we going to have a cultural match? This is like the number one thing we look for. Like we spend all our time looking at them, like who is this person, where is their background, can we find anything online? Then we spend time with them. So that's like the number one evaluation criteria. Because we're going to work together. So it kind of doesn't matter what they did in the past. It's what we're going to do next 5 years together. So that's number one. Number two, we start looking into product. What is this product? Is it an awesome product? Is it like, what's the IP? What's the innovation?
Yeah.
And the last thing we do is we bring the finance people in who are like sitting in Excel sheets.
Can I ask, with Tabular, did you even bring the finance people in? It had what, like under 5 million of ARR and you paid 1.8 billion? Did the finance people get in the door for that deal?
No, we locked the doors. Tabular is an interesting one because I kind of stayed in touch with the founder. I've been tracking him and trying to get him to work at Databricks long before he started Tabular. So when he was at Netflix. So it's something that I've been staying close to for many, many years. So we knew what we were getting.
I've realized we've been talking for 6 or 7 minutes, and I haven't asked you actually what Databricks does. So I'm going to ask you that I'm going to ask you to do it in the way that if you were sitting at a bar with somebody who doesn't know anything about AI or technology at all, what's the short version of what Databricks does?
Yeah, look, let's take 60% of the Fortune 500s. They have massive amounts of data. That doesn't get organized by itself. So the boring plumbing behind the scenes to organize all that data and secure it, which is super important because there's cyber attacks left and right. Everybody's trying to hack these companies. So securing it and then enabling you to do, get insights out of it. And the insights are both backwards looking, like, hey, how much did I sell last week? How's this product doing in Japan? And also forward looking, so AI. Which customer is going to churn? How much should I stock up this particular product? All the way to generative AI. Should I, JetBlue uses us to figure out, when there's a delay on the airplane. What's going on? Which terminal should I go to? So it's a generative AI application that you talk to. Or Block uses us, Square. When you set that up, you can now, the store owners can just speak in English and say, hey, I have 5 products. The price point is this. And it'll set everything up for you automatically using AI. But all the basically data plumbing that happens in the large organizations, chances are if there's any large organization, they're probably using Databricks for all of that.
When you helped found the company, there were 7 of you, correct?
Yes.
Am I correct saying they're all still with the company? You're the second CEO, but everyone's still there.
Everyone's there.
That's unusual. Even companies with 2 co-founders, often one by now, would be gone. Why do you think everyone is still there? And can you talk a little bit about that dynamic? Because it is unusual.
Yeah, look, I think we were, again, it goes back to the culture. We were researchers. And we were working together actually at UC Berkeley even before that, doing research. So, I think that research culture has kind of continued. And even though I have the CEO title, it's kind of like 7 CEOs. They have a lot of power in the company. And they run whole product lines. And, they're a pain in the butt for me.
All right, let's talk about this news. You guys announced this morning you have $10 billion in commitments. Most of this is going to be kind of an employee tender. And there's other things you announced, kind of $3 billion of ARR. Why raise this round instead of just go public and get the money out of the public markets and let everybody cash out that way who wants to cash out?
Yeah, look, when we were thinking about this, we were looking back and forth, and we were like, the earliest time we would IPO, we wanted to wait. This year was election year and so on. We want to get some stability. People are worried about interest rates, inflation, so on and so forth. So we said, look, it's dumb to IPO this year. So we're definitely going to wait.
Even though the companies that have IPO'd this year have done well.
Well, I would say that this was 6 months ago, right? You got to plan ahead. So 6 months ago, we were like, hey, it's just dumb to IPO this year. Just wait, right? Let things settle, get more data, don't have to. And then working backwards, it was like, well, earliest theoretical possibility of an IPO would be next year. And then, there's lockup periods and so on. So it would just be too long of a period for employees to get liquidity, frankly speaking. So that's kind of what started it. It's like, hey, we want to just quickly, fast get cash. And we started small. We want to get like $3 or $4 billion is what it started at. But then the press, unfortunately, starts leaking these things.
Oh, so
and then all the investors
blaming
come
the press for bringing in $10 billion? Yes. Everyone here would like the press to give them $10 billion.
Literally, what happens is the press leaks it, and then you get your phone explodes with investors that are like, Ali, it was like 7 years ago I talked to you, but I love you. Let's talk.
I heard you guys have basically 25 new investors on the cap table, institutional investors. Is that about right?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
You do know this.
I do not know. I have a big finance team, hundreds of people that take care of this. I know the top investors, and I met them. But yeah, there was like, what was shocking to us is we said, okay, so we'll raise a few billion. But then suddenly I saw this Excel sheet where they keep tally of all the people that want to invest, and it was $19 billion of interest. And I almost fell off the chair. And we hadn't even talked to everybody. And it's like, oh my God, that's huge amount of numbers. So then we actually moved the price up. And the price went up.
Where did the price start? The reports were around 55 billion. Is that ballpark correct?
Yeah, I started around $80 a share.
Yep.
Ended up at 92.50. So yeah, so it kept raising the price, and the investors kept getting more and more unhappy. So at some point, we just stopped, and we said we're just going to cut back the investors, and we'll just take half of the money.
Does this mean that Databricks doesn't go public in 2025?
No, I think that it's still a possibility. Again, theoretical possibility that we go next year. That would be the earliest. But it could also very well happen the year after. I do think the majority of the lifetime of Databricks will be as a public company, even though we're not public yet. But the thing that's really top of mind for us is, can we provide liquidity to the employees? And this enables us to do that. And that's super, super important.
If I'm an employee, though, and granted, I obviously want to get some liquidity because I want to be able to pay the mortgage.
Yeah.
I've had this stock that keeps appreciating in value. I get that. But if I'm an employee, am I not sitting there thinking, damn, if we had just gone public last week, we'd probably be a $100 billion company, and that 92, whatever you said, it would probably be $130. This deal is causing me to basically leave money on the table.
Well, what I want to do with Databricks, with the investors and the employees, is to get the folks that are really excited about having massive impact with data and AI over the next decade or so in the long run. Those are the people that we want to have. And by the way, there might be some people that are like, hey, I've put in many, many years, I'm done here. We want to thank them. There's no hard feelings. They helped build the company. But what we want to really do is focus on that long term. We're not trying to time something. Like, yeah, the market is super hot right now. It might not be in a quarter. Something devastating might happen. The AI bubble might burst. Oh my God.
Do you think it's an AI bubble? You said bubble, so I'm going to ask, is this a bubble?
I mean, it's peak bubble, AI bubble, yes, of course. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to know that a company with 5 people, which had no product, no innovation, no IP, just recent grads, are worth hundreds of millions, sometimes billions. You get billion-dollar valuations on these startups that have nothing. That's bubble.
Does it worry you at all? It's interesting. When I talk to your investors, some of your investors who did this round, they all say the same thing. They all think they got a bargain on this deal.
Mm-hmm. Good for them.
Good for them. Do you have any concern, though, if you think this is a bubble, do you have any concern that you're going to have to go back to those employees, whether it be 6 months or a year or 18 months, and say, we're worth less now, your shares are worth less now?
Well, no, I think that we have...
Not because the company is struggling, but because the valuations were inflated, your multiples are inflated.
Anything can happen to anyone. In fact, we do this thing. I'm paranoid. You started at the beginning where I grew up. I grew up in wartime. Literally, they were bombing the city when I grew up. So look, every year we do these skyfall plans where we think about what happens if GFC 2.0 happens, which is Great Financial Crisis 2.0. So we'll look through all these different scenarios. So we're ready for anything that comes our way. But I think we have a really steady business. Our churn is all-time low, and it's been forever, and it's a recurring business. So I sometimes joke that even if you get a professional CEO who understands nothing about our business, they'll be able to continue to drive this to, say 10 billion revenue. Mm-hmm. So I'm not too worried. But yeah, things happen in the world, and sometimes things might go down. But if we stay focused on the long term, I think data and AI is going to continue every year that goes to be slightly more important and slightly more impact on people's lives, on companies. If we just stay focused on that and keep doing that, great things will happen to us.
You said you think that the majority of Databricks' life in the end will be as a public company.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of your peers who basically said there's no good reason for us to ever go public. It is more pain than it is worth. We will maybe do it if we are forced to, but we really don't want to. From your perspective, is there a value of eventually going public, whether it's next year or the year after? And if so, why do it at all? There's a lot of private money. You could just keep flipping. You could be Mars.
First of all, it was very exhausting raising $10 billion. It's basically I had to facilitate this gigantic transaction between all these parties.
That's why you have 100 finance people. They do.
Yeah, but I can't just fully delegate to them, right? You want to make sure that So it is a big logistical operation just to keep facilitating these trades. So that's number one reason not to do it. Second, it is a massive marketing event, which we haven't had yet, but we're saving it for one day. So that gives you a big boost. Especially, it's a big boost in the United States. Of course, we're international, but the bulk of the business here is in the United States. So I think that's also not to be underestimated. That's it. I think those are the things. I do think the value of being public has reduced over the years because there's so much access to capital. I think 10, 15 years ago, needless to say, there's no reason. You had to go public. You couldn't get this kind of capital at all. So things have changed, but nevertheless, we will go. We're running it like a public company, and we are going to go public.
One of the things that's interesting about this round is that you are now worth more, from a valuation perspective, I know private versus public, than Snowflake is. You have...
that?
Exactly. So you have kind of said, it has almost sounded like since Frank left, Snowflake is no longer your competition, or at least the way you view it. So
kind of.
If Frank is gone and Snowflake is no longer the target, who's the target now?
Look, I think that, we have, it's kind of like, you're playing a card game and somebody gives you a hand and you look at your cards and you have an amazing hand. And you're like, oh my God, this is great. So, but what do you think when you have that amazing hand? You kind of think, don't screw it up, right? So I think the most important thing for Databricks is don't screw it up. Like, treat our employees well. Make sure that we're secure and that we're safe and that we continue innovating. Don't lose that innovative research kind of origin sort of ingredient that we had. If we keep doing those things, I think great things will happen. We don't need to obsess with this.
You don't think you need if not a target, and I don't even mean an enemy, but like that bigger company, that bigger CEO that you're chasing, because that's been, it seems, from the outside, part of Databricks' DNA.
It was. We had a program called Snow Melt, and we were going after Snowflake. And we demonized them, but it kind of, that's behind us, to be honest.
There's not like a Salesforce shrink or something program that you guys have at the.
We don't have that anymore. No.
You don't have anything like that.
We partner very closely with Salesforce. We love them.
You partner with lots of companies.
We're partner friendly.
Fair, you're partner friendly. Something else you said recently, and this came up actually in the earlier conversation that Ina had with the Sierra AI guys, was you talked a bit, and this kind of goes to AI bubble or AI hype, talked a bit about how you view this a little bit like the later stage .com boom. You talked a little bit about kind of, you had all these search engines, and this isn't about Databricks per se, but a lot of the partners you have.
Yeah.
And when I think back to 96, 97, 98, there was a lot of search engines. There was a ton of them. And in the end, a new one came and crushed them all. When you think of all these big Gen AI companies that you are working with, their customers and quasi-competitors of yours, do you think a lot of them are going to go down in the dustbin like Lycos and Alta Vista, and we're going to look at massive fundraisings of companies that truly disappear?
I think so. However, it's also maybe helpful to remind people that there was a little bookseller called Amazon.com in 1997. And back then, I remember because I wrote my master's thesis about it as a young kid.
I remember because the only stock my father ever shorted.
There you go. And it was, and by the way, just to remind people, they were selling books on the internet, and people said, well, obviously people are not going to buy those, because what kind of idiot would put their credit card on the internet? Like, no one will ever do that. And here we are today. So that company is still around. So yeah, while Lycos and Alta Vista and Yahoo are not here,
I just mean there seems to be some comps between them and some of the LLM companies in the sense of what they do and what the.
I mean, I agree. I think that people are obsessed with what's going on right now, but I think that we're going to see major changes. And I think there's going to be new mega companies that are born that have not even been started yet. We're going to see that in the next 10 years. The big challenge is it's very hard to predict them because who would have predicted Twitter or Airbnb or Facebook in 1999? Back then, we were just obsessed with routers and Cisco. And it was like, and then IT, right? Pets.com. So, it's very, very hard to predict these things. But you can imagine, let me just throw one out that I'm kind of I think it's very plausible. Take healthcare, which is, I think, 17% of US GDP. And it's extremely important to everyone in this room and their family members. And at some point in your life, it will be extremely important if it's not already is. Imagine the killer app. Okay, that's a weird phrasing. Imagine imagine that amazing, app that has, you have this personalized doctor that has seen billions of patients and can give you the best healthcare advice. How much would you pay for that?
Exactly.
A lot, I think. That company doesn't exist right now. And I don't think it's any of the existing players are going to be that. And I could go on about education. How much do you care about education for your kids and so on? Right now, education, it's, that's not an interesting hot. Actually, in the VC space.
Well, it's something that VCs have lost money on consistently for generations and have stopped investing in.
Yeah, VCs always say, do never invest in education. You can never, ever succeed there. There's no innovation to be. But I think they're actually wrong. In this new era, it's obvious. What do we use LLMs for? They're basically professors, personal professors that can just sit there and teach you stuff. So I think we're going to see a lot happening here. But I do also think some of these companies are amazing, and what they've accomplished already is really amazing. And maybe one of them is going to be that Amazon.com that survives in the next 10, 20 years.
I want to ask you a similar question to what I asked the Glean CEO here last night. I was on the stage back in May, and David Sachs was in that seat. He is now the incoming AI czar, crypto czar too. Yeah. If you were talking to Sachs, what's one thing, if you were AI czar, you're talking to him, what's the one thing you would like an AI czar to do?
Yeah, I would be a little bit careful with the regulation. I think we got a little bit, it was regulation craze last year. We had these flops counts and all of that, there was all these executive orders and EU and, politics, intertwined with politics at companies, with regulatory capture and all kinds of things. But now it turns out that we were worried about these scaling laws. We're going to create super AGI. And now it turns out we hit the scaling wall. Yeah. And, that's apparently not happening. So that was
So is your message to Sachs, kick your feet up and don't do anything?
No, I mean, we should pay attention. I think that actually, and I think this is well known, to look at the use cases. We don't want people to do we should definitely make sure that it's illegal to have use cases that are hurtful for society. But that's different from like, hey, don't do any research on AI, or let's hold the research back. Or I remember when there was like, hey, let's have a moratorium, 6 months, don't do anything for just 6 months, and then we can start again.
Yeah.
That's kind of silly.
Final question for you. When you talk about Databricks expanding, and obviously you continue to hire, and you think about, to kind of bring this back, you think about your own experience growing up, obviously as a refugee, not in the United States, but in Europe. What are your thoughts in terms of kind of the growth of Silicon Valley, your company and other companies like yours, when it comes to immigration and possibly how US immigration laws are going to change, both for skilled and unskilled workers?
Well, I don't know how it's going to change. But I do think that, I did a startup in Europe as well. And I love Europe. I'm kind of a European, at heart. I grew up my whole life there. I could not create a Databricks there. Silicon Valley is very, very unique. There's like, it's many things come together. It's like the perfect storm that makes it happen. One of them is funding. Like, good luck raising $10 billion in Europe. So that's just one. But the second one is that you get this extremely hungry talent that comes here, and we make huge sacrifices. Working 100 hours, giving up everything in their life. It's kind of crazy how much risk they take and how hard they work. So that's the second one. And then you have the universities, and then you have the research labs nearby. It's really, really unique. So I hope that we can preserve it and continue doubling down on it. I think it's a secret kind of engine behind the United States, GDP kind of growth and motor behind the economy. So I hope that we preserve it, but who knows what's going to happen with it.
That's all the time we have. Ali, thank you so much.